Shifting our focus over to the grain markets now, we had the chance to catch up with Jeff Peterson, who's the president of Heartland Farm Partners. Jeff was kind enough to join us down here at the FFA convention on Wednesday afternoon. The month of April brings a new sense of optimism as planters get dusted off, but in the markets, it's much of the same story from the last month. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, inflation, and the prospect of tight supplies continue to drive this volatile market. We began the conversation with Jeff by talking about some of the latest news impacting the markets. Joining us now is Jeff Peterson of Heartland Farm Partners. Jeff, great to have you on Market Journal.
Oh, it's always fun, especially in this atmosphere. It's cool to be around all the FFA students again.
Here at the Nebraska FFA State Convention. Let's talk about these markets in the grain complex, Jeff. It seems like there's been a lot of bullish news lately to support the markets. What's been the most bullish piece of news you've seen?
So I think the biggest thing right now gets to be back to the Russia going ahead and having a war with Ukraine. And basically the whole piece of that we're focused on is how many acres are physically going to get planted, because the whole unknown there is that how long is this going to drag out, how many acres are not going to get planted. So that's the biggest piece, Bryce, that I see.
Let's take a look back to last week. U.S. Department of Agriculture had a few reports that made the headlines as we're about a week past that. What's lingering in your mind about the most important information or the most interesting piece of information that came out from that?
Well, I think there's a couple pieces that we definitely will focus on. Let's start first with the Planting Intentions Report. And it was a surprise coming in at about 3.9 million acres less than what we had last year on the corn side. We were kind of thinking as our group about 2 million acres less. So that lower corn number definitely came in and surprised us. And then on the flip side of that, we didn't think all the acres that they physically took out of corn and reduced their number would end up over on the soybean side. So for us, it would be those acres numbers. A couple comments on that, I think, is as we go forward, I think more of that corn number is going to be focused on what the weather's like. And we're getting off to a decent start here on planting. About 2% planted is where it's at, but it's not a record pace. And we've got Minnesota up there that's actually picking up probably some wetter and colder conditions than normal. So I think ultimately that corn number down the road is really going to be focused on how quickly this crop goes in. We think that's probably the smallest corn number that's put out there. We also think that's probably the biggest soybean acre number that's put out there this year.
Jeff, you mentioned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's been interesting to follow along with that as it comes to the producers there. There shows that at least some of the pictures I've seen, they are going ahead with planting if they can access their fields. What have you heard on the ground there? Any updates you can share with our viewers?
Yeah, so some numbers that we ended up seeing here this morning, and this would be as of April 4th, would show that they're about 4.9% planted. So to put that in perspective, Bryce, that means they've got about 2 million acres that they've got planted. So we went back and took a look, where were they last year at this time? That would be about 89% of where they were last year. So they're lagging about 10% right now. Now what's going to get interesting is that we know everybody's kind of talking, there's probably enough fuel out there to do about 20% of their crop. So we know that ultimately first 20% should go okay. What we don't know is how planting is going to go after that. So we're going to have to continue to watch that close.
Obviously some big question marks there when it comes to if they're able to get their crop in the ground. When it comes to the crop that they grew last year that's currently in storage, have you heard any updates when it comes to shipping, be it barge or by rail?
Yeah, so what we're hearing right now is nothing's moving out of the port, so the shipping traffic is shut down. And just to put that back in perspective, that's normally where they sent out over 95% of what their shipments were. But they are moving some stuff west by rail. And for the month of March, we showed that they'd have probably moved out somewhere between 36 and 40 million bushels. Now that may seem like quite a bit, but in comparison to what they should be moving out, they probably should be moving out many multiples of that. And part of the challenge they do run into is that they're using a different gauge on rail, so as they physically get to the borders, as they come over to Europe, then ultimately everything has to be offloaded into other trains to go ahead and make its way on over into Europe.
Jeff, back here we've got things we're watching. You mentioned planting, the global issues as well, but what else is catching your attention with the market trade right now?
Yeah, so I think for us right now, we're watching very closely planting progress. Right with that though, we're watching the weather. We're watching how is things progressing out there. That drought monitor still shows some really big dryness in Nebraska across probably kind of that middle, call it 90% of Iowa, But we're actually seeing a little bit of improvement up there in Minnesota. Eastern part of South Dakota is a little better. Eastern part of North Dakota is a little better. So we're watching those areas. We want to see ultimately how planting goes, because we want to watch out for not only the pace, but we want to get a feel of also what we're seeing out there for those prevent plant areas that can't quite get all their acres in. So that's the biggest thing, and we're going to be watching that planting progress really close going forward, and then ultimately see what kind of emergence we get, because we're actually hearing some areas in south central Nebraska, Bryce, that are actually doing a little irrigating just because conditions are so dry, or to get the soil in condition to be able to go ahead and plant.
Real quick, Jeff, I want to get to a producer question. Had a producer reach out to me asking, realizing that as we have this conversation today, soybeans closer to $16 than they are $17. He was curious your thoughts on if we could see a market take a run at that $17 figure again.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, overall, there's still a tightness out there in the veg oils. The other thing we have to kind of keep in mind is that this South American crop is smaller than what it physically would have been a year ago on the soybean side. So they're going to physically go ahead and run out of beans quicker. We're starting to see a little bit of an upkick in our exports on the inspection side and also on the export sales side. So I think we can have another run at that level.
Good stuff, Jeff. Never enough time. Thanks for coming on Market Journal and giving your insights.
You bet. I always enjoy it.